Ever find yourself glued to the screen, completely caught up in the latest Pinoy action flick or maybe one of those heartwarming dramas? You're totally invested in the story, but
Yeah.
ah,
It's easy to forget about everyone working behind the scenes, right?
totally. Have you ever stopped to think about all those people, all that talent that make that movie magic happen?
It's an army of people, really, and they often work under incredible pressure, demanding schedules.
It's true. Long hours on set, unpredictable locations, the pressure to get that perfect shot. It's not an easy industry. And honestly, for a long time, there weren't a lot of protections in place for the people, the ones who actually bring these stories to life.
Right, it's a tough business, no doubt. But things are changing, at least in the Philippines. We're diving deep into Republic Act No. 11, 1996, more commonly known as the Eddie Garcia Law. It's a game changer, setting a new standard for, well, for worker protection in Philippine film and television.
Okay, Eddie Garcia. Now, that's a name that carries weight in the industry for those who might not be familiar.
A true legend.
He was an icon of Philippine cinema, actor, director, producer.
The whole package.
His career, it spanned decades. His contributions to Filipino film, immeasurable.
Absolutely. And, it was a tragic onset accident back in 2019 that really highlighted the desperate need for, well, for stronger safety measures in the industry.
A terrible loss that, in a way, sparked a movement, a push for change.
Exactly. And that's where the Eddie Garcia law comes into play. It's about making things safer, fairer, more respectful for everyone on set. And I mean everyone, from the biggest stars to those crew members you don't even see on screen.
So this isn't just about preventing accidents, it's about changing the entire culture of the industry.
100%. And it all starts with the fundamentals. Employment contracts. We've got these implementing rules and regulations, DO 246, fresh off the press, September 2024. And let me tell you, they're comprehensive.
I bet. So what kind of things are we talking about? What's in these new rules?
Well, first of all, gone are the days of shaky agreements jotted down on napkins. This law is clear. Every single person working in film and TV, no matter their job, no matter how long the project, they deserve a written contract. And get this, it has to be in a language they actually understand.
Makes sense. That way everyone's on the same page. They know what they're getting paid, what's expected of them.
Precisely. And it's not just about the money either. These contracts need to outline the work schedule, overtime, even how complaints are handled. Think of it as like a roadmap for the whole working relationship.
What about freelancers? They're everywhere in the film and TV industry.
Great point. And it's something the Eddie Garcia law addresses directly. Even without a formal written contract, freelancers, they're covered. Their rights. They're protected by the law itself.
That's huge. No more being taken advantage of just because you're not a permanent employee.
Exactly. It levels the playing field, makes sure that everyone, no matter how they're employed, is treated fairly.
I love it. But even with a rock-solid contract, we all know this industry is notorious for crazy hours. Does the law address that at all?
It does, absolutely. And this is where things get interesting. There's a maximum limit of 14 hours of work per day, 60 hours a week.
Okay, 14 hours is still, that's a long day, especially if you're on your feet, under pressure.
Oh, for sure. And keep in mind, that's not even including meal breaks or anything. But here's the kicker. On top of that 14-hour limit, there's a mandatory 10-hour rest period between workdays, even for those lock-in shoots, where everyone's basically living on set.
Those are pretty common, right? The lock-in shoots.
Very common, especially for those big productions. But even then, even with that demand, the law recognizes that people need time to rest, to recharge.
Yeah.
Imagine you just wrapped a 14-hour day on set. Could you bounce back after only 10 hours? What do you think?
Honestly, I don't know if I could. I'd be ready for a nap and about a gallon of coffee.
Right. And that's why that part of the law is so crucial. It acknowledges the toll that those long hours take, the effect on people's health, their well-being. Just something to remember the next time you're up late binge watching, right?
Definitely. It really makes you realize that behind every scene, every line of dialogue, there are actual people putting in the work.
Real people who deserve to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And it's not just about rest either. Overtime pay, mandatory, anything over 8 hours a day, night shift differentials, you bet. For anyone working between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., of course, a contract can offer even better terms. But these are the legal minimums now.
So no more pulling all-nighters without getting properly compensated.
Not if they're following the law. And it goes beyond just the paycheck, too. The Eddie Garcia law, it gets into the nitty-gritty of what employers have to provide on set. And we're not just talking about snacks and drinks either.
Oh, like what? Tell me more.
Well, for starters, food and water. Those are non-negotiables. And not just, a bag of chips and a lukewarm soda. We're talking proper meals, enough to keep everyone going throughout the day.
I'm picturing those catering spreads you see in behind-the-scenes clips. Mountains of food, enough to feed an army.
Hopefully. But it also covers the basic things that sometimes get overlooked. Clean restrooms, for instance.
Sure.
Not just any restrooms, separate ones for all genders.
So no more dodgy porta potties or like changing in the back of a van.
Let's hope not. And even for overnight shoots, the law's got it covered. Accommodation. It has to be safe, clean, comfortable. The idea is that everyone deserves a dignified workplace, regardless of what they do.
Right, you can't expect someone to do their best work if they're exhausted, haven't eaten properly, or are worried about, like, basic hygiene.
Exactly. And it's not just about comfort. Safety is paramount, especially when you're filming on location.
Speaking of safety, film sets, they can be so unpredictable. What kind of protections does the law actually put in place?
You said it. You never know what you're going to get, right? Film sets, they're constantly moving, changing, like living, breathing puzzles. And that's really where this law shines. It doesn't just, take a one-size-fits-all approach. It gets specific. We're talking about, real occupational safety and health standards.
Okay, so, what are we talking about here? What are some of the specifics they really focused on?
Well, for every single project, big budget, indie film, doesn't matter, they have to have a customized safety plan.
So not just some generic thing they pull off the shelf and dust off.
Right. It has to be a living document, something that outlines the specific risks of that shoot. It needs emergency procedures for that location, that set, those actors.
So they can't just use the same plan for, like, a historical drama filmed in a studio and a crazy action movie with car chases through the streets of Manila.
Exactly. Each project is different, its own animal, and the law gets that. No cookie-cutter solutions.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's say you're filming a scene, right? On a busy street, jeepneys whizzing by, vendors all over, maybe even some karaoke in the background.
Classic Filipino scene, right? But seriously, they've thought about that. The safety officers, who are now mandatory on every set, by the way, they have to assess all of it. The traffic, where the pedestrians are, any potential hazards from the environment.
So no more asking the director's nephew to handle the lighting because he's good with electronics.
Let's hope not. And it's not just everyday risks either. What about stunts? Those are a huge part of action films. The law is super clear on this. Stunt performers need to be trained, experienced pros, no ifs, ands, or buts. And if a stunt involves heights, personal fall protection system, every single time.
So no more dangling from buildings with a prayer and some rope someone found in the back of a truck.
You got it. And even beyond those big, obvious risks, you have scenes with animals, underwater shoots, even using certain special effects. Each situation has its own dangers.
It really makes you appreciate how much work goes into making those movie moments happen safely.
It really is a team effort. And one of the most important parts of the law is that it empowers every single person on set, no matter their job, to speak up if they see something that's not right, something that seems unsafe.
That's huge. But let's be honest, on a film set with everything going on, deadlines, pressure, I imagine it could be intimidating to speak up, especially if you're worried about losing your job.
You're not wrong. It's a fast-paced environment. But that's exactly what the law is trying to change. This whole culture of, don't rock the boat, even if it means your safety's on the line. It's about making it clear that if you see something, you say something. And if you refuse to do something you feel is unsafe, you're protected.
Creating a space where everyone feels heard, that's so important. Now, another thing that's been a problem, not just in the Philippines, but globally, is harassment and discrimination in the entertainment industry. Does the Eddie Garcia Law address that?
It does, yeah. It takes a really strong stance against any kind of harassment, discrimination, or abuse on set. We're talking age, gender, race, religion. It doesn't matter. Absolutely zero tolerance.
It's about time. But how do they enforce that?
Well, for one thing, they made it mandatory for every production to have a sexual harassment prevention policy.
Yeah.
Plus, they have to establish committees to handle complaints.
So there's a system in place, a way for people to come forward if something happens without being afraid of, retaliation.
That's the idea. It's about fostering a safe space, physically and emotionally, for everyone on set. Because everyone deserves to work in an environment where they're not worried about harassment and discrimination.
Right. It's not just about protecting their physical safety. It's about dignity.
Exactly. And that goes for everybody, even the youngest people working on these productions.
Ah, yes. Minors in the industry. They definitely need that extra layer of protection.
You're especially vulnerable, right? And the Eddie Garcia Law gets that. So, for instance, children under 15, they can't work more than 20 hours a week, and even then, never more than 4 hours a day. And forget about those late nights. There's no working between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m.
I'm actually kind of surprised by that. I just assumed that if a young actor was really eager to break into the industry, they'd be subject to the same schedule as the adults.
Right. Especially with how competitive it is to succeed in this industry. But the law draws a very clear line. Kids and teens, they need extra protection, even if they are trying to make their dreams come true. Even for older teenagers, 15 to 18, there's a limit. Max 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week,
Mhm.
and still no working between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
Protecting their well-being, making sure they're not overworked or taken advantage of, that's so important.
Absolutely. And before a minor can even set foot on a set, employers need to obtain work permits from the Department of Labor and Employment. No exceptions.
It sounds like they've really tried to think of everything. But you know how it is, right? You hear about these laws that look good on paper but are difficult to enforce. What's the situation like here?
Right. The million-dollar question. And well, honestly, it's still pretty early, isn't it?
Okay.
This law, the Eddie Garcia law, it's a huge step forward, but it's going to take time and effort to make sure it's actually put into practice effectively.
It's one of those things, right? You don't just write a law and expect everything to magically change overnight. It takes work. So, what do you see as the biggest challenges in actually making sure all these great ideas, all these protections really translate into like real change on the ground?
It's a good question. And honestly, it's something I think about a lot. Because, yeah, having those protections written down, that's a good start. But actually changing the habits, the whole way an industry operates, that's a whole other thing.
Especially in an industry like film and TV, right?
Right.
Where everything's so fast-paced, new projects, crazy deadlines, schedules changing all the time.
It's constant, right? And let's be real, there are always going to be people who resist change, who see these new rules as, a pain, something that slows them down.
The old guard, set in their ways.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why enforcement is so important. The Department of Labor and Employment, they have a huge role to play here. They need to be proactive, monitoring productions, investigating any complaints that come up. They need to make it crystal clear that if someone breaks the rules, there will be consequences.
So no more looking the other way when someone's pulling a 16-hour workday or they're cutting corners on safety.
Let's hope not. But honestly, it's not just about, punishment. Education is a big part of it too.
Getting everyone on the same page, understanding why these rules are in place, how they benefit everyone.
Exactly. Production companies, studios, even individual directors, they all need to get it. They need to see that these regulations, they're not the enemy. They're actually good for business in the long run.
It's true. A happy, healthy crew, that translates to better films.
100%.
Yeah.
But it's not just on the people in charge either. Workers themselves, they have a role to play here too.
Yeah.
They need to know what their rights are, like really know them.
So no more signing contracts they don't understand or feeling pressured to work insane hours because they think they have to.
Exactly. If something doesn't feel right, they need to feel empowered to speak up, to report it without worrying about like getting blacklisted or something.
It's about creating that culture where everyone feels safe, respected, where their voice matters.
You said it. But there's this one aspect of the law I find really interesting, and it doesn't get talked about as much.
Oh, what is it? I'm intrigued.
Intellectual property rights. It's kind of a big deal, especially for actors.
Oh, right. Section 18. Right. I remember that coming up. To be honest, I didn't totally follow that part.
It's a little in the weeds, but basically, it ensures that film and TV workers, especially actors, they're protected under, like, the Philippines Intellectual Property Code. What it boils down to is that the law recognizes their performance as their own. It's their work.
Okay, so does that mean they have a say in how their image is used even after filming's done, even after a movie is released?
Exactly. Now, they might agree to sign over some of those rights in their contract, especially if they're getting paid well up front. But this law provides a safety net, a guarantee that they still maintain some control over how their work is used down the line.
So no more seeing your face on a billboard for something you've never even heard of without seeing a dime.
Exactly. It gives them the right to negotiate for things like, I don't know, payments for reruns, streaming rights, even merchandise.
That's amazing. I love that. It's about time the industry started recognizing the value these artists bring.
Exactly. It's only fair. But with all this talk about actors and directors and all that, it's easy to forget about another group that's essential. The contractors, the subcontractors, the people behind the scenes, keeping things running.
The unsung heroes of so many
Right.
productions.
And they often get lost in the shuffle. But the Eddie Garcia Law, it doesn't let them fall through the cracks. It's very clear.
Okay.
They are workers, and they're entitled to the same protections as anyone else on set.
So no more taking advantage of freelancers or like trying to get away with not giving independent contractors the benefits they deserve.
Exactly. The law puts a stop to those shady practices, things like labor-only contracting, where companies try to avoid providing benefits by pretending their workers aren't actually employees.
Glad to hear it. But honestly, beyond all these rules and regulations, the specifics, what do you think is the most important thing about the Eddie Garcia Law? Like, what kind of lasting impact do you think it'll have?
For me, it's about changing the narrative. It's about recognizing that the people who work so hard behind the scenes, they're not invisible. Their work matters. They deserve to be treated with respect. Their safety is not negotiable. And their well-being, it's not something you can just ignore.
It's about time the industry started treating its own with the dignity and respect they deserve.
Perfectly said.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone deep into the Eddie Garcia Law, explored its potential impact, even talked about some of the challenges in actually making it work the way it's supposed to.
It's been great.
It has. But I think this is just the beginning of the conversation. This law, it's a huge step, but there's always more to do. There are so many other questions to ask. And for our listeners, that's where you come in. We've talked about what the Eddie Garcia Law does, but what about what it doesn't do? What are your thoughts? What other issues do you care about when it comes to making the film and TV industry a fairer, more equitable place for everyone? Let us know. We really want to hear from you.